Get 12 weeks of The Spectator in print and online for just £12. And we'll give you a £20 Amazon gift voucher, absolutely free. Go to spectator.co.uk/voucher.
Welcome to Spectator Out Loud. I'm Fraser Nelson. Every week we ask some of our writers to read out their articles from the magazine, and this week we have Freddy Gray writing about Donald Trump's re-election campaign, we have Emma Byrne writing about her extraordinary situation being caught up in the new Cladding scandal, and finally Lara Prendergast in the pitfalls of floral masks. First, Freddy Gray.
Keep America Great is President Donald Trump's 2020 re-election slogan, and it sounds off. The phrase doesn't have the same ring as Make America Great Again, the mantra that Trump pinched from Reagan and repeated to victory in 2016. As an acronym, CAG is uglier than MAGA. The words particularly jar when America's cities are burning, homicide rates are spiking, almost 180,000 Americans have died of or with COVID, and the country is reeling from the largest economic shock of all time. You call that great? Then again, 2020 is an even crazier year than 2016, and the maddest news is that Donald Trump might be about to defy the odds again and win. He remains much loathed, divisive, behind in the polls, but he's suddenly running a much better campaign than his opponent, the Democratic nominee Joe Biden, and it's beginning to show. Compare and contrast the two big party conventions we've just witnessed. This week, the Republican Party had its quadrennial nomination fest, and it felt much more coherent than the event the Democrats put on last week. Thanks to COVID, both conventions have been conducted online, which gives them an unreal quality. Yet Team Trump's video presentation has been slicker and simpler than Biden's, despite, or maybe because of, the fact that the Democrats had the might of Hollywood and the entertainment industry behind them. Perhaps it is the benefit of going second. The Trump show is still weird as hell, of course. On Tuesday, the Republicans had to pull one of the speakers, an angel mom called Mary Ann Mendoza, after she posted links to an online conspiracy theory that suggested the Rothschild family is trying to enslave the world. "Do yourself a favour and read this thread," she tweeted, then later claimed she hadn't read it herself. That whiff of anti-Semitism was offset by Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who arguably breached diplomatic protocols by delivering his convention address from the rooftop of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, Israel. After Pompeo, Melania Trump, the First Lady, came over well as she praised her husband and talked about protecting children from social media and addiction. Many Americans may be wondering, though, why they had to hear speeches from not one, not two, but 6 members of the president's family. On Monday, Kimberly Guilfoyle, the former TV presenter, sounded possessed as she howled, almost orgasmically, that the best is yet to come. Team Trump called that passion. Everybody else knows that the reason she is on the campaign is because she is Donald Jr.'s girlfriend. It's a land of opportunity. Yet that sordid freakiness is the key to Trump's success. 5 long years after he descended that shiny moving staircase in the Trump Tower to launch his presidential bid, he still has the power to horrify the media and fascinate people. His great talent as a campaigner is that while much of the world continues to shriek and gawp at the Trump circus, the president and his talking heads are able to speak directly to American voters about the issues that most concern them. Again and again this week, Family Trump touched on the economy, China, restoring law and order, and free speech. The Democrats, by contrast, used their convention to fulminate against Trump's character and structural racism. Many Americans agree that Trump is awful. They fear that under his divisive leadership, the country is falling apart. But voters are more immediately afraid about their jobs, and poll after poll suggests that voters trust Trump more than Biden to fix the economy. Americans will also have noticed that after an enormous drop at the peak of the COVID crisis, employment is rebounding. The greatest economy the world has ever seen, as Trump likes to call it, the one he claims to have built entirely through his unique brilliance, is roaring back. In May and June, Trump struggled to identify Biden's weak points. His campaign mocked the Democratic nominee for being mentally frail, perhaps not realising that a huge percentage of the American electorate is over 65 and doesn't respond well to that talk. But Team Trump has now adapted its Sleepy Joe rhetoric. Their latest campaign videos say that the radical left has taken over Joe Biden, as if the poor old boy had been impregnated by a malevolent alien. Judging by the recent tightening in the polls, that message is getting through to the public. Trump's critics are fond of saying that the president is only interested in campaigning. He doesn't care about governing. It's a fair point. Yet people forget what a canny and creative campaigner he can be. He always seems to find a way to win. Biden lacks Trump's originality. The Democratic candidate surprised many observers last week by giving a fairly fluent nomination speech. He'd looked so cataleptic recently that most viewers were impressed at his ability to read quite well from a teleprompter. That's not exactly a high bar, given that he wants to lead the free world, and the speech turns out to have been shockingly similar to his vice presidential nomination speech in 2008, as a viral mashup video of the two addresses shows. Biden only mentioned China once. Family Trump, on the other hand, this week called COVID-19 the China's virus at every opportunity. Such talk offends delicate liberals, but plays well in America's Rust Belt, where workers have lost out to Chinese labour, seen relatives overdose on Chinese-made opioids, and have now had their hopes ripped away from them again by a disease that originated in China. Not so long ago, Team Biden seemed to understand the importance of sounding tough against Beijing. In April, a Biden advertisement claimed that Trump had rolled over for the Chinese as coronavirus spread around the world. But some Democrats called that line of attack xenophobic and accused Biden of trying to out-Trump Trump. The horror. That manic political correctness and national self-loathing are the Democratic Party's most crippling flaws. Biden and co try to talk about American exceptionalism, but they always end up talking about racism. Trump Republicans, by contrast, are increasingly skillful at presenting themselves as optimistic and open-hearted patriots. On Monday night, as lefty Twitter users kept snickering over Guilfoyle's ululations, millions tuned into the speech of the black Senator Tim Scott, who said that he was living his mother's American dream and believed that the next American century can be better than the last. Another speaker that night was Maximo Alvarez, a Cuban immigrant, who said, "If I gave away everything I have today, it would not equal 1% of what I was given when I came to this great country of ours, the gift of freedom." Americans have always lapped that stuff up, and the stars and stripes schmaltz fits the Keep America Great theme. Yet both parties realise that the times they are apocalyptic, and that means they must discuss the darkness as much as the light. Team Biden talks about the end of democracy if Trump isn't removed from office. Team Trump says that the radical left is destroying Western civilization, and America will be finished if the Democrats take over this time. The agitators in several American cities seem hell-bent on proving the Republicans right. On Sunday night, a violent Black Lives Matter protest erupted in response to yet another disturbing online video of a police shooting, this time in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which just so happens to be a crucial state in this election. The victim of the shooting has survived somehow, and the details of the incident remain unclear. That didn't stop the rush to riot. Angry gangs of black and white youths smashed and burned shops and cars and attacked policemen in the streets. "Today we woke to grieve yet again," tweeted Biden elliptically, as he called for a full and transparent investigation. His running mate Kamala Harris said the police must be held accountable. Neither appealed for calm on the streets. The trouble for Biden and Harris is that public perceptions of the Black Lives Matter movement are souring. George Floyd's death in Minnesota on 25th of May sparked tremendous outrage across a world that was already angry about the pandemic and the lockdowns. Polls suggested huge support for the BLM cause. Senior Democrats, Biden included, capitalised by firmly aligning themselves with the movement and demanding radical change. But it's been 3 months now, and the BLM riots are ongoing. Non-protesters are becoming increasingly fed up and receptive to Trump's argument that law and order must now be restored using force. One survey found that in the immediate aftermath of Floyd's death, a majority of non-college educated whites in various swing states said they supported BLM. By the end of July, a majority said the opposite. If Biden and Harris were more adept campaigners, they would spot that shift among these once Democratic voters who swung so decisively towards Trump in 2016 and would moderate their language accordingly. They would condemn vandalism and the destruction of often black-owned businesses as much as they talked about the need to transform America. They would point out more forcefully that Trump, for all his tough talk, has allowed the unrest to spread. But Biden and Harris can't switch signals, especially not on sensitive racial issues. Trump, however, seems to be hogging the middle ground. His campaign has condemned excessive police force to the disappointment of his more hardcore fans, while he tweets aggressively about stopping the criminality. Democrats will take comfort from the polls, even if they are still haunted by Hillary Clinton's late collapse in 2016. Biden remains almost 8 points ahead nationally, and he continues to lead in most battleground states. Joe is widely considered to be much more likeable than Clinton, who lost so narrowly to Trump 4 years ago. And independents prefer him. Trump, meanwhile, is approaching the end of his first term with a lower approval rating than any post-war president who has won re-election. That said, his approval rating is higher than George H.W. Bush's or Jimmy Carter's, the last two presidents who failed to be re-elected. Trump's efforts to appeal more to black voters, who make up 13% of the US population, don't appear to have yet borne much fruit. Democrats can hope that the BLM story and the fact that Kamala Harris is mixed race will boost African American turnout in their favour. Yet Trump is more popular among whites than he was 4 years ago, and whites still make up 60% of the US population. He's also slightly more popular among the 18% who are Hispanic. It's foolish to make political predictions, especially in such a tumultuous year. But don't be surprised if, in just over 9 weeks, we all find ourselves agreeing that the greatest trick that Donald ever pulled was to make America elect him again.
That was Freddy Gray, now Emma Byrne.
Within the next year or two, I could go bankrupt. My mistake. To join a government-backed affordable housing scheme and purchase a one-bedroom flat in East London. For the past 4 years, it has been my pride and my joy. Not to mention my savings, my pension, and my financial future. I was grateful for the government's help in getting a foothold in the city. But now, another government policy is hurtling towards me, against which I have no defence. And nor do potentially tens of thousands of first-time buyers and the owners of affordable housing in my position. It might just be the next big scandal to hit the government. It's all about cladding. 3 years ago, the tragedy at Grenfell showed what can happen when you get this wrong. Insulation added for environmental reasons turned out to be highly flammable. The residents were living in a death trap, and when a fridge caught fire, the tower block became an inferno. This, of course, raised the immediate question, how many others are living like this? And the answer, it turns out, is all too many, 600,000, including me. Or so we're now told by my housing association. We've been warned that the cladding covering our block of flats, along with 11,300 other buildings across the UK, is potentially combustible and it has to be tested. Should it fail those tests, the cladding will have to be replaced, and that huge financial cost is most likely to fall on leaseholders. Now, you might think this is unfortunate, but is it really a disaster? I mean, unexpected expenses are, after all, one of the normal pitfalls of home ownership. In the great Monopoly game of life, you pick up a chance card that has you buying a new boiler, fixing your roof, or treating subsidence. Is cladding really that different? Well, the answer is yes. First, a good survey can protect you against repair bills. There was nothing to protect me against what turned out to be inept government regulations which allowed flammable cladding to be fitted. Next is the scale of the cost. The new draft Building Safety Bill, due to be examined by a parliamentary committee, makes clear that leaseholders will be liable for sums of up to £78,000 payable within 28 days. Other home repairs are affordable. This would be crushing. And all the more so because I'm a shared ownership tenant. I own a 40% stake in my flat. My housing association owns the rest, which I pay rent on. But I'm liable for the whole repair bill. To put it mildly, I don't have £78,000 or anything approaching this sum. We're not talking about being sent back to the beginning of my financial life. I'd be sent way backwards. It would take me years of work and savings to pay off the debt. The government has offered some help, but it's going to fall woefully short. In his March budget, Rishi Sunak announced a £1 billion first-come, first-served fund on top of £600 million already promised for those affected. However, government officials have admitted the cost will be nearer to £3.5 billion, meaning 2/3 of homeowners will miss out on assistance. At the same time, many housing associations, including Moat, One Housing Group and Optivo, have started writing to leaseholders warning them that, because of charity laws, flat owners will be liable for remediation work if funding applications fail. As Peter Apps, deputy editor of Inside Housing, starkly puts it, we could face the very ugly scenario in coming months of people who purchase government-backed affordable housing products being bankrupted to cover the costs of removing dangerous cladding. It's not only the threat of a devastating cladding bill that keeps me awake at night. If a building is deemed too unsafe, a waking watch can be ordered, whereby between 2 and 5 people walk around the property day and night, ready to sound the alarm if they see a fire. Although these were only ever meant to be an interim measure, many waking watches are still in place after more than a year and costs are spiralling. At Paddington Walk, a development 6 miles away from me, leaseholders have been charged an astonishing £21,000 per week for a waking watch over a 10-month period. This has all been exacerbated by the external wall fire review, the EWS1 fiasco, currently paralysing parts of the housing market, again due to cladding. The EWS1 form was introduced at the end of last year to give mortgage lenders confidence that high-rises over 18 metres were safe. However, in January, the government suddenly changed its fire safety guidance to include buildings of any height, even some that don't have cladding. Without a form, owners of these homes can't sell or remortgage. The result? Meltdown. There are only 300 inspectors able to complete the form, leading, it has been warned, to waiting lists of up to 10 years. It's estimated that 3 million people in private flats are effectively trapped. Since I can't sell my home or remortgage because I don't yet have the form, my property is technically worthless. And there are millions like me wondering what, if anything, we can do. Will we end up like the students in the exams marking fiasco, told that we're the victims of a Kafkaesque, bureaucratic cock-up for whom nothing could be done? I've been told that all this could take years to finalise. Meanwhile, life is on hold. A generation are being trapped in their homes. None of us has the kind of money to fix things. It's hard to overstate the misery this is causing, of the human, not just financial kind. The stories are starting to be told. A couple who can't get divorced because valuers can't begin to estimate the cost of fixing their home. A new mum who can't get out of her shared ownership house because no one will buy while this mess is unresolved. And those are just the examples people talk openly about. When they do, what strikes you isn't the anger in their voices, it's the utter despair. Suffice to say, I'm not surprised by research by the UK Cladding Action Group, which found that 14% of affected leaseholders have had suicidal thoughts, and 8% have felt compelled to self-harm. Affordable housing schemes were seen as a great Conservative idea, to promote a property-owning democracy. I was sold a dream, to work hard, get on the property ladder, get ahead. I took them at their word, and I now face being ruined as a result. And it's not something that any of us whose lives have been plunged into this nightmare will forget in a hurry.
That was Emma Byrne and finally Lara Prendergast.
Now that we must all wear face masks, it is hardly surprising that they have started to become a fashion accessory. An Israeli jeweller has created a gold and diamond encrusted mask that is said to be worth $1.5 million. According to the designer, the man who commissioned the extravagant mask, which weighs nearly 100 times as much as a typical surgical mask, had 2 demands. That it be completed by the end of the year, and that it be the most expensive mask in the world. Diamond-encrusted face masks may not yet be everywhere, but floral ones certainly are. Once you start spotting them, you will see them all over town, normally covering the faces of women between the ages of 30 and 50. The Duchess of Cambridge was recently photographed wearing a floral face mask while delivering donations to a baby bank. Her mask came from the British kidswear label Amaya and was made with a Liberty fabric called Wiltshire. I suppose there is a certain irony in choosing a Liberty print to decorate something the government has forced us to wear. As part of the war effort, people all around the UK are now stitching face masks. I ordered one via the website Etsy from a friendly woman in Yorkshire who usually makes chintzy bunting, but has instead turned her hand to mask making, the bunting market presumably having been hit quite hard by the pandemic. I went for a retro Liberty print option, thinking that the fuchsia pink and orange design, with its hint of flower power and free love, was a good antidote to our new reality of endless dollops of hand sanitizer and hostile relations with strangers in the supermarket aisle. It is as cheerful as a mask can be. It is also made of cotton, which means it is easy to bung in the washing machine. But the problem is, and I wonder whether the Duchess of Cambridge has faced a similar issue, the cotton is almost impossible to breathe through. Having used the mask just for quick dashes into the shops for milk, bread, etc., I only realised this problem when I took a taxi ride across London last week. In the back of an Uber, where mask wearing is also now mandatory, I found myself becoming lightheaded. 15 minutes into the journey, I started to feel faint. By the time I arrived at my destination, I thought I might pass out. After thanking the driver, who was wearing a more professional-looking mask, one with air vents on either side, I flung open the door as quickly as I could and gulped in lungfuls of air. Stuffing the mask into my handbag, I vowed not to use it again, aside from perhaps the occasional trip to the supermarket. I felt foolish for prioritising aspiration over respiration. The next day, I ordered some of those hospital green breathable masks, the sort once beloved by tourists travelling on the London Underground. They are certainly easier to breathe through, but they are not nearly as pretty as my floral mask.
That was Lara Prendergast, and that's it for this week. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Max Jeffrey, our producer.
Get 12 weeks of The Spectator in print and online for just £12. And we'll give you a £20 Amazon gift voucher, absolutely free. Go to spectator.co.uk/voucher.